Welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. Today I want to talk about hit point alternatives. That is, to different ways to kind of degrade the character as you would. One thing about the hit point system, I'll say off the bat, is that it's really elegant in its simplicity. And there's been lots of attempts, shall we say, to go other ways, right? Breaking it up into different types of stuff, whether it be mental damage, physical damage, deadly damage versus knockout damage. I've seen all kinds of things in different games, and this can all be really fun. But really the question becomes, why? So for me, the main reason is that I think people rely on hit points too much for things beyond combat. That is to say, so many times when I see people say, oh, I run a deadly spellcasting system, they lose hit points if they cast a spell and stuff like that. It makes me think, I'm not sure if that's how I would use hit points. It feels like a spellcaster is already starting off with a limited number of hit points, and now you're adding to this, right? And because they cast a spell, now an arrow is going to kill them easier. And I don't know, it just never really sat well with me, so I didn't care for those kind of systems. But I think there are ways that we can degrade the PCs, or the PCs can degrade throughout play, that aren't directly related to the hit points that can be really fun, both for things like dangerous spellcasting and also for combat. Exhaustion. One of my favorite mechanics when I was running the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons was the exhaustion mechanic. And my understanding is they changed it a little bit in the new version, but people thought, well, it didn't do enough up front and it was too deadly. And I kind of liked that. I used it a lot, and players knew that when they were exhausted, it was going to be dangerous. There's also exhaustion in BX or even OD&D. That is, if you don't rest, you take a -1 penalty to your rolls. I think it's just 2 hit rolls. So this is not, again, a new thing. I like the flavor of the newer version better, to be honest with you, than just, oh, you take a penalty, because, oh, you take a penalty is just like a +1 sword, right? It doesn't add anything to the game. Whereas if you have somebody be exhausted and something specifically happens, I know the first stage of exhaustion is a -1, right? But then you like slow down, you lose half your hit points. So we're going to hit points here, but not till you're deeper into it. And again, once you're not exhausted, you get them back. Or, you eventually can't move, right? This is kind of really fun and can be super useful because you can use it for a lot of things, including what I mentioned earlier, spellcasting. I find this type of mechanic is much more satisfying as a OSR magic user with 5 hit points at 3rd level, to not have to roll D4 damage to myself when I want to cast a spell, extra spell or fail a spell or whatever, but rather, okay, I'm going to take a little bit of a penalty, I'm going to take a penalty, but if we can get some rest, I'll be fine. This, I think, is a really cool and useful way to do it. And again, it can work for in-combat things as well. I've seen people do things like if you get a critical hit against somebody that is a natural 20, that they take a level of exhaustion, something to that effect. So you add that extra little bit to it. And I think, again, because it's got a narrative feel that people understand, when you say exhaustion, it is just what you think it is, it's a little bit easier to kind of swallow in the game world, whereas again, hit points, while I think they're super elegant and work really well, they do have that problem, right? Where it's like, is it, meat points, or is it your will to live? Is it whatever? Is it a combination? And if so, how does healing work? Blah, blah, blah. This doesn't have that problem, right? You get a critical hit against you, that means you're kind of disorientated. You take some exhaustion. You just got to rest and you'll be fine. Nice and simple. Ability scores. Degrading ability scores is one of my favorite ways to handle things like poisons. So, many poisons can be save or die, and you can like that or not like it. I kind of generally don't like it unless it's a really, really deadly creature and it's very much telegraphed. I like poisons that mess with you. If you think about giant centipedes in old school gaming, I think the poison says something to the effect of you're sick for a week. Like, okay, what does that even mean, right? So again, you can attach things to this. You get bit by a poison and it lowers your constitution or even your dexterity because it makes you dizzy or something, right? Or it could lower your strength, right? You feel weakened. So many of these things can be the case. And of course, if you reach 0, then you reach death. You can also, because generally an ability score is going to be higher than somebody's hit points, especially at low levels, you can also use it as a ticking clock, right? Where they lose like 1 point a day or something until they get the solution, the antidote or remove curse or cure disease or whatever. So it really adds that extra depth to it. And again, you don't need to replace hit points with this. If you look at a game like Into the Odd, and I know a lot of the games that respond by it So like Mouse Rider, for instance, I believe use the same system where the HP is hit protection. And that's something that you use to kind of avoid taking damage. And then once you're hit, you start to lose strength. And they have a whole critical system in there, which is very cool. This is not what I'm talking about. I still like hit points for combat. Again, I think they're super elegant, but I like this for other things, right? You fall in a pit trap, so your dexterity drops a little bit because you sprained your ankle, right? You get hit by poison, your constitution goes down, etc. You could even do intelligence. It's making you hard to think because it's giving you a pounding headache. So many of these things can work. And again, it becomes more narrative than just numbers being chopped away. Broken or lost items. So one of the things that made me think about this week is I've been looking at Crown and Skull, and I kind of mentioned it a little bit before. I want to run it a little bit before I really talk a lot about it, but Crown and Skull replaces hit points with the idea that your items get damaged when you get hit. Also, your skills can get damaged, but again, I'll talk about it later, but your items get damaged. Let's just talk about that. So you've got a sword or something, and instead of taking hit point damage when somebody hits you, your sword gets damaged, broken or bent or whatever, and it can be repaired later, blah, blah, blah. But the idea is that you're taking item damage. Now, whether or not that works in combat well for me narratively, I'll let you know when I run the game. But this is what I often use for things like traps. Falling stones, pit traps, any kind of like tripwire things, something slams you against the wall. This is when I go, okay, if you failed your save or however I'm adjudicating it, something's going to break, right? Potions go first, right? Anything fragile in your bag is going to break first, like your potions or your oil, right? And then if you don't have anything like that, then maybe something gets bent or torn. And we kind of again, work it narratively into the story. You fell into this pit trap and you landed funny and your flask of oil or your lantern shatters. And now you don't have that item and you've got to recover it at some point, get more, take some from another fallen adventurer further in the dungeon or go back to town and buy some. Basically, your stuff gets damaged or lost because of being hit or damaged or whatever, whether it be in combat or whatnot. Again, another place you could use this is like fire breath, right? Dragon breathes fire on you, you melt your shield, right? Destroys your sword, instead of having the damage immediately be to hit points where it'll just instantly kill most low-level player characters. A dragon can mess with you a little bit, right? So this can be really fun and something that I use a lot. This is probably, of all these I've said so far, this is probably the one I use the most, is the idea of stuff being damaged. Loss of time. So something mentioned directly in original Dungeons & Dragons with Pit Trap at that is and I'm paraphrasing, it says something like, if they fall in the Pit Trap, roll a d6. If on a 1 or a 2, they take a little bit of hit point damage. Otherwise, it just delays them one turn. Now, if you're running a fully narrative game and not using a turn-based system and procedural stuff like the old school game works, that might seem like a nothing. But in a game where every turn counts because you're rolling wandering monsters, because it's burning torches, because you're in a race to get in and out of the dungeon, that matters. So again, just having a pit trap where somebody falls in and loses time is enough. But again, going back to the ability score damage, if you don't want to say, well, your dex is reduced, so now you move slower, because somebody might be like, well, hold on, I still have more dex than this guy. Why is he not moving slower? Right? If you get that kind of player, you could just say you fall down, you sprain your ankle, now you're moving at 2/3 your movement rate. And you can just do that. Slow them down, give them the next level of encumbrance is a simple way to do it. Have them lose time. And the time can also be falling wall collapses in front of them. They can't get past it. Right? You pass your save, you jump to the other side, and you're in safety. Or what I would probably do with my group is I would say, if you pass your save, you can choose which one you want to do, because I'm nice and I don't want to split the party all the time. And assuming everybody passes, they can all choose to jump through. But if that one person fails, they have to decide: are we jumping through, or are we staying back with this guy, right? So depending on the group and what spells they have and other things, dimension doors and whatnot, they might decide to do that. Again, that's very situational. But by having things like that be a choice and having the penalty be a loss of time or a loss of speed can be important, again, especially in a dungeon crawl. Let's say you're doing overland travel, right? In my solo game, I've learned this a lot. A person on foot in OD&D moves 3 hexes a day. A person on a horse moves 10, a riding horse. So, if the penalty is that you lose your horse, right, that's a significant penalty. And if you're trying to get somewhere, you might not get there on time. You might run out of rations. You might have more encounters. So there's lots of things that can happen by slowing somebody down instead of just saying, okay, again, rocks fall and you take hit point damage. This saves your hit points for the combats and allows combats to be a little bit more epic and very self-contained, which I personally like, because I like mini games. And finally, let's talk about that. The mini game. There was an adventure, and I can't quite remember which one it was, that I read years ago where, and if you know what it is, let me know in the comments below, where they basically had a dueling system. And the dueling system superseded hit points. If you challenged somebody to a duel or they challenged you and you fought, you rolled on this chart. And if I remember right, it had hit locations. And if you hit a location twice, I believe, it became incapacitated. And if you hit basically the chest or whatever twice, then you won. You basically knocked them down and they're not dead, right? They don't lose any hit points, but they're effectively down. Maybe they were dead. I can't remember, but I don't think so. And it's just a way that you can adjudicate something like that. I've done the chainmail system of jousting, right? Because AD&D tells you that fighters, if you approach their castle, will want to joust you to win, your armor from you, which is just so fun. These are really fun, right? Because again, instead of jousting and doing hit point versus hit point, it's like whoever wins the joust using these rules will win. Otherwise, you lose, right? And you don't lose any hit points, so you don't have to worry about resting for a week to heal or finding a magic user with a potion or a cleric with a spell. You can very easily have these little fun contests. They can be wrestling contests, contests of will, and they can be duels, and just have some other means besides hit points to determine when you are down, unconscious, lost the duel, however you want to think about it. So I'll end where I started, which is that I actually think hit points are a great system. Tell me in the comments below why they're not, I guess, but don't, or you can if you want. But really, sometimes we want to reach beyond that for specific types of tasks. It's great, but don't use it for everything, right? It's like if one ability score, talking to you, dexterity, was like more important than anything else in so many ways, right? You don't want that in your game. You want things to be spread out. So if hit points are everything, then hit points become the most important thing. But if you can lose ability scores, if you can lose speed, if you can get exhausted, if you can be, thrown off in that way, it just gives you more options to have a more narrative interaction in the game and then save those hit points for the big fights. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, check the description. You'll find a link to my Patreon and also my Discord. Jump over there, join the conversation. I'd love to talk to you over there. And I'm going to say talk to you twice here. I'll talk to you soon.